right, so it looks like we got a big story here, and this actually kind of piggybacks off of a video I had made yesterday about AOC's speech at the DNC. She gave a speech at the DNC, she had the crowd cheering her name, everybody's getting up, like 50-year-old wine moms were really excited for her, and what was clear was she had become more accepted by the Democratic Party than she used to be. She started out as a rebel, she was going to the Nancy Pelosi sit-in, like, protest, basically, that, like, she was kind of this rebel, and I think we all took it for granted. At least I did. And that speech that she gave, it kind of didn't have like any of the super progressive positions. It kind of just sounded like almost anybody else on there. I know she was talking about union busting and stuff like that, but that's pretty common stuff to be talked about in terms of that kind of rhetoric. Not Medicare for all and those kinds of things were spoken about. So it made me nostalgic about the past. I'm happy that she's able to kind of become more mainstream, so she's able to kind of push the power lens forward for the things she supports. But at the same time, it also left me feeling very nostalgic for the past, and I actually took it for granted. But there appear to be some people who are actually really disappointed in what's going on. So before I get into those people who are AOC fans who are kind of who are disenchanted with what's going on, I first want to go over this reporting here. So it says, news in our write-up of AOC speech, DNC approached her about it, not the other way around. So it says, by handing her a primetime speaking slot at the DNC in Chicago on Monday night, the Democratic Party has fully embraced New York Representative AOC, a still occasional insurgent against the party's leadership who opened her career with the shocking ouster of an incumbent. It was not even AOC's idea to speak at the convention, according to a senior aide. The convention organizers contacted her about the opportunity, and she used it to deliver a stem winder, generating some of the loudest cheers of the convention's first night and leaving the crowd chanting AOC as she walked off stage. And dude, the energy from her speech, go watch my video, the speech that she gave, the energy it left was crazy. The crowd was chanting. It was nuts. The energy was crazy. It was insane. Like, that was the strongest energy I think I saw that whole night there. And it wasn't even her decision to actually speak there. They reached out to her. They slid into her DMs, not the other way around. So it was just, that's crazy news. So she didn't even reach out. They reached out to her, which again just goes to show that she's definitely pretty heavily accepted in the Democratic Party. And I wonder if any of that has to do with Nancy Pelosi now stepping down for her position. I don't know if that has anything to do with either. But she obviously changed her rhetoric a lot, right? And so while it's really good that, she's somebody who's now looking for the long-term, for more long-term progressive positions, she doesn't really seem to talk about those issues like Medicare for all, for example, anymore. She doesn't really talk about those anymore, and I feel like those things are the biggest victim, where you have those things falling out of the Overton window now, where Kamala Harris says, hey, I'm not supporting Medicare for all. She reset it now. One of her aides said it now. She had walked it back during the first year of the Biden administration as well. She clearly never supported it, really, and she definitely doesn't support it now, and nobody cares. So it's a really bad sign for the Overton window. But so there's some people. So Nathan J. Robinson, I'm sure you guys know him. He's head of the Current Affairs, so it's like or editor of Current Affairs. So he's definitely like a big lefty for sure, like an actual lefty. He's not a liberal. He's a leftist, right? So it says, The Atlantic, of course, delighted by the, quote, new AOC, who does not challenge the party leadership and has stopped speaking like a leftist. So The Atlantic says the new AOC, the progressive congresswoman, is no longer speaking solely to the left wing, but to the party as a whole, by Yair Rosenberg. So there's been some corporate media outlets now who are reporting on this saying, yay, AOC is no longer this rebellious insurgent anymore. She's just going with the flow of whatever the corporate Democrats say, basically. And so it is pretty interesting. So he doesn't like this, that, she's someone who doesn't challenge party leadership and stop being like a leftist, pretty much. And so you can kind of see that kind of thing. So power broke an insider rather than a protester. They're not wrong. So he's basically feels like she's kind of more of like this insider now. And there's actually a war going on in the responses. So this is pretty interesting because you see both sides of the coin. There's an AOC war happening right now. So there's a large chunk, and I think a majority of people are basically saying, hey, this is good for the long run. But then there's some people who are like, dude, this is effed up in the short run. Or just effed up, period, I should say. So like this guy says, a vile careerist. She told a vile lie by claiming that Harris is working tirelessly for a ceasefire. That's going to lead into another thing we talk about. The Blob ate AOC and will now wear her as a skin suit, same as it ever was. Basically saying she's a sellout. This is a meme you give when you say like an unpopular opinion. I like her as a more effective left-wing congressperson. So again, there's a war going on where this is fighting back against that. Saying give it another year or two, we can start calling her Hillary. Obligatory ContraPoints meme. So this one, again, is defending AOC, where she says they don't want victory, they don't want power, they want to endlessly critique power. So again, trying to make that argument. This is a coconut head, though, so that's to be expected. Her entire speech is on big business and billionaires, emphasized Trump being a union. Again, that's not like crazy out of the thing. Like Democrats, support unions and that kind of thing. So it's just not like a big deal. So that's not really a thing there. Pelosi 2.0 is always the end game. She's actually growing up. Who knew? So you can see there's like a fight going on, right? There's a lot of backlash, but then there's also support for her. So there's a lot of backlash. Endorsement of the Atlantic is extremely clarifying. Adios, AOC. So pretty much a lot of this, and so he's disappointed. We also have here Emma Vigeland from the Majority Report. So she's actually also jumping in. So this is pretty surprising. So AOC caused some backlash because she said that Kamala Harris is working tirelessly to secure a ceasefire in Gaza. Which obviously there's no evidence of that. It's just complete bogus, completely made up. Emma Vigeland says, functionally the party line, disappointing. So she's actually calling her out as well. So she's also disappointed in AOC. So there's a lot of disappointment that exists. And then again, there's some fighting back, but again, this is a coconut head though, so there's this temporary unity that's going on, and I'm going to make a video about a war that's brewing. There's a war brewing right now, and what's going to happen is there's this temporary ceasefire. So channels like Mike Figueredo, even myself and David Dole and everyone are making videos like, hey, Kamala Harris surging, everyone's kind of on the coconut train, but that means that there's a bunch of coconut heads who are subscribing to the channels who are not going to be happy once Kamala is elected and the war starts to begin, where it's like, hey, we're going to hold your feet to the fire to support progressive causes. So that's going to explode at some point. But there's a lot of defense of hers at this point, so you can kind of see this kind of stuff. But yeah, so it goes to show there's a lot of defense for AOC in this scenario, but there's also like some backlash from some pretty big people. You see, obviously, Emma Vigeland is a pretty big deal in terms of like how influential she is and how much of a role she plays. So a lot of people disappointed at this, but a lot of people defending AOC as well. So she has a lot of defenders. So Anand Giridharadas, he's a writer on wealth inequality. He says, the real story of this DNC may be this. People who are not being listened to now are, and a new political style is rising, centering attention, emotion, story, and fight. My essay on how Kamala Harris's brat pack is taking over the Democratic Party. So again, this is like kind of a weird sort of reporting of trying to make it sound like progressivism is being listened to. This is complete bogus. Medicare for All, for example, is completely out of the ropes. And then even like Tim Walz being chosen is great. He wasn't chosen for his progressive policies. And then also, he's not even Bernie Sanders in terms of how far he is in that direction. So Adam Johnson says, I feel entirely alienated for people who write and think about politics this way. Increasingly, I feel like we are on totally different planets. So what's interesting about this comment from Adam Johnson is I'm not exactly sure if he's like super against what AOC is doing, or if he's just against this sort of corporate reporting on what's going on. Because there's sort of this weird thing where it's like, okay, if AOC is doing what she's doing and Kamala Harris and all this stuff is going on, don't try and act like real progressive things are being heard, like Medicare for All and free college and stuff like that, like a non-mean tested free college and federal jobs guarantee and those kinds of things. Don't make it sound like those things are in the Overton window or being heard, because they're clearly not. So for AOC's situation, if you're to say it's a long run, she is definitely making a current sacrifice, and there is no there's no benefit currently to those things. It would have to be in the long run. And then there's a lot of damage being done currently to those issues, because I think they were in the Overton window when Bernie Sanders was running. But what ended up happening, I think, was it's fallen out of the public conversation. It's fallen out of the thing to the point where, Kamala Harris openly says, hey, I don't support this, and nobody really cares. Nobody cares about that. We're all just kind of stuck on beating Trump for now. Again, I think once Trump is defeated, I think that's going to kind of blow up. But for now, that's kind of what's going on. And so he's annoyed with the sort of corporate writing that's going on with this. But I'm not exactly sure if he's super like against those kinds of things of what she's doing. And then he's saying, the Bernie campaign had massively good vibes, and it was like 10 minutes ago. Sure, your liberals don't have a monopoly on vibes, nor is this concept new. This person says, it's crazy because yesterday made me feel utterly hopeless about the direction of this country, what counts as left wing, and there's so many people insisting we're winning, actually. So there's definitely a lot of like in the socialist side and lefty side kind of disappointment in this. But the vibes right now are just so strong. The vibes are just so strong that they're actually muting this heavily. And so the only like real strong backlash she's gotten from any left-wing people or anything has been on the issue of Israel-Palestine. And even that has been super muted to the point where like Mike Figueredo was too scared to actually send out his own tweet. He just retweeted a tweet from Matt Leck, right? That got a lot of retweets. So I think that's kind of what's going on here. Because see, there's a lot of like disappointment going on, right? There's a lot of anger at people, what people call doomers, but people who are negative bother me a lot less than people get all weepy and indignant about them. Guys, the president signed a non-binding statement of concern about the genocide. That's a huge win for us. So there's some kind of muted backlash right now that exists. But let me know what you guys think. I think there's a lot of ambivalence that exists with me. If it's like possible that the long run sort of really does end up helping the causes, obviously, I guess it would be worth it. But I definitely don't want the gaslighting in terms of like, oh man, there's crazy progressive stuff happening. Kamala Harris is going to be super progressive. Definitely not. And then also, we're definitely sacrificing in the current because she doesn't even talk about, like, she didn't even mention Medicare for all or any of that kind of stuff in the speech. So, and those kinds of things, right? And definitely not strongly. So, what it ends up coming down to is you're sacrificing in the current, and that's very risky and definitely very questionable. And then there also is value to being like sort of a rebel kind of thing. But in order to take power, you have to not be a rebel. But in order to do that, you're sacrificing your message right now. So I kind of see both sides here, and then you can see it with the comment about the ceasefire thing. It's just, yeah, I don't even know what the point of that was, because I don't think you're going to convince anybody who even cares about a ceasefire in Gaza about that. It's just going to piss them off. So I'm surprised she would even say that, I guess. But maybe that's just to kind of placate people in terms of like, oh, hey, well, we are talking about it. But yeah, you can just see the way that she's having to sacrifice in the now. And so they're kind of, I think, pissed about the gaslighting from, corporate reporting and this kind of stuff where it's like, hey, progressive congressman no longer speaking solely to the left wing but to the party as a whole, and so now it's like, oh hey, this is the better thing or whatever. I guess this wouldn't be the gaslighting scenario. The other one is the gaslighting one. But yeah, so pretty interesting stuff. Let me know what your thoughts are. I think the AOC debate is pretty heated, but we can see some pretty influential people kind of coming out and disagreeing with AOC, or kind of being like, hey man, like she's not really talking like a leftist anymore, not challenging party leadership, etc. Which those are, the things that she used to say she supported were good things. So definitely let me know your thoughts down below. I'm definitely very ambivalent, but yeah, pretty interesting stuff.